Evaporation.
Condensation.
Yeah.
Precipitation.
Good. Okay.
Baller.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Did you say teleportation? Unfortunately, that's not part of the rate of the water cycle.
You said that.
Okay, and then more specifically of evaporation, you've got evapotranspiration.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds fancy.
Was that like the water coming out of the plant?
Exactly, yeah. So with respiration, or just like, yeah, how plants pull water up through the ground and release it through their leaves.
Wait, and why do you do that?
Why do they do that?
To cool
Do
down.
they want to do that?
No.
A
Jordan?
lot of CO2 in through the pores too.
Yeah, so if you want to be able to breathe, you necessarily have to be open to releasing water.
Okay.
It's just part of getting gases or molecules across a membrane. If you want to be able to do that, therefore things will also be able to leave. Yeah.
When we sweat, it's just normal evaporation?
Yeah, it's just evaporating off our skin, and that's what cools us down. Right. Okay. So 90% of water in the atmosphere has passed through plants. And then exits leaves, for example. So that's 90% of the water in the atmosphere. Yeah.
How do they determine that number?
I don't know. That's a great question.
Like across all time, like it just seems like so weird.
To be able to calculate that for the entire Earth. You can look at surface area. You can look at, I think in one of the things I read, they were looking at the entire Earth and then kind of mapping out green areas and doing it that way. Yeah. So you might say to yourself, well, the Earth's a really big place, right? And that's a lot. But if you consider that where you have leaves, what are we doing by sticking these leaves out? Looks more like a truffula tree, but what are we doing?
Oh, increasing surface area.
Yeah, you're increasing surface area. So even though the world is super big, plants they have lots of surface area. Okay.
More surface area than the Earth?
I don't know what the number is. You could look that up. Today's Friday.
What do you mean today's Friday?
It's research day at the end. The last 20 minutes is like research.
Okay. Cool. So it's a pretty simple process, right? Water evaporates, precipitates, is taken up by plants, evapotranspiration, the cycle continues. Okay, as with the other cycles, however, what's going on with this cycle today, now? What? What did we talk about the nitrogen cycle and what was influencing the nitrogen cycle?
Oh, our waste.
Yeah,
Us.
right?
Yeah.
Humans are influencing it.
Oh,
So
yeah.
humans are also influencing water. So let's talk about, so you guys know that the vast majority of water on this planet is in the ocean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the little bit of water, fresh water, let's see how we use water. So human use of water. And this is all in your textbook if you want to see it there. Okay, so to produce 1 pound of meat, you have to use 228 liters of water.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot, right?
Wait, why? Just for the plants to drink so it can grow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 1 pound of meat, you want to take a guess?
A million.
Like,
Yeah.
it's super high.
9,500 liters.
1 pound?
1 pound of meat.
Does it depend on the kind of meat?
Yes. Beef, will be more water costly than chicken, for example, or fish. Okay, to create 1 ton of steel, for example, you can also think of this as oil, iron, other materials. $20,000 liters of water to produce 1 ton of steel. That's a lot. So what is the issue with this? Let's just talk about food for now. What is the issue with this?
It's a lot of water.
Yeah, and the population is growing, as you guys know, right? So, can we grow the population of water?
No.
No, water is a finite resource. Anybody seen The Big Short? Is that the one with,
Steve Carell and.
exactly. Do you guys remember at the end of the movie how they said that this is all true, right? And they said that the guy from that movie, the guy in real life, do you know what he's investing in now?
Water?
Fresh water. So this is finite. This is a really big issue, right? Okay. How else are we affecting the water cycle and basically water in general? Can you guys think of anything?
Using well water?
Using well water, so that gets at the articles you guys read, right, on the aquifer. So let's talk about the Ogallala Aquifer. What's going on with it?
Draining it.
It's going down. Yeah, we're pulling out more water than can be like
Replaced.
Right. So the aquifer, it's not like a big bucket underground, right?
No.
It's if you look underground, there are crevices, nooks and crannies, etc. And if you drill a hole into this, that hole is going to start to fill with water, right? To wherever that level is. And every year that they look to see where the water level is, it's going down and down and down. And do you guys remember how much of the U.S. crop production is based on the Ogallala Aquifer? It said it somewhere, I forget the statistic, but give me a ballpark.
A lot.
Like upwards of 30–40%, right? So what's going to happen when this runs out? That's going to be really bad, right? And we've known this has been an issue for decades, right? Why do we need so much water from the aquifer? What are we growing out here? Huh?
Cattle?
Cattle and corn. Why are we growing so much corn? Feed the cattle. Why are we growing so much cattle?
Feed us.
Because we, as Americans, eat a ton of beef, right? Beef is by far the most water intensive of the meat, right? So, and the other thing is that, do you know why corn is so cheap? Why is corn so cheap that we can feed it to cows? Why are we growing corn to feed cows when cows can eat grass?
There's corn syrup.
Corn is super, super cheap. Do you know why corn is super cheap?
Isn't it
so much
subsidized?
Why is there so much of it?
Because it's cheap.
It's easy to
But
grow.
why?
Very
Good
durable. Wait,
Subsidy? Or
Yes, we are
it
subsidizing
was
it.
all this guy.
The
It's all this
government
guy.
subsidizes
You keep
corn.
it.
Yeah.
In Interstellar, wasn't corn like one of the last?
In what? What?
Interstellar?
I haven't seen Interstellar.
Keep it.
Really?
Yeah.
You have to see it.
Okay,
Yesterday.
well now I have to look at this channel that
It's
Andrew
like,
told me I have
it's
to watch
like the
Interstellar.
potato famine except with
It's a
all food
team.
around
It's a
the
team
world.
effort.
Really?
Team effort.
And corn
I
was
like
like one of the
that.
last
Give me a
crops that
bar.
they were
Say the
able to
answer.
grow in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You use the voice. I don't know
Okay, so corn is one of the last crops they're able to grow in the movie.
Mhm.
Interesting. Yeah, so
Oh.
the federal government subsidizes corn by a long shot. And did you guys know this?
Yeah.
Federal government is the worst.
What?
Federal government is the worst.
Okay, so that would be a general statement that I don't want to see on your research papers. Okay?
Great
General
example of
statement
what
with
not to
no
Corn.
source, right? Okay. So thank you for giving me that example, Andrew.
No problem.
Excellent. Okay, so yeah, the government subsidizes corn, and that's why it's so cheap. And one of the reasons they subsidize it is because they wanted to keep prices even for farmers, so that wasn't this boom and bust cycle. Which, yes, okay, great. However, now we have such an excess of corn, and it's so cheap, because the government is able to subsidize it, that we now find ways to use it that we would have never used it before. High fructose corn syrup, which people are starting to not eat as much. So what are we doing with that high fructose corn syrup, or the corn in general?
Gas.
Well, we do feed it to cows, but
Gas.
we were already doing that.
Oh, biofuels.
We're shipping it out, we're exporting it and selling it to South America.
Oh.
And so that is driving, that's creating a problem with sugar in South America. So South America produces a lot of sugar, but if you're selling super cheap high fructose corn syrup, people aren't going to buy sugar anymore. They're going to buy the high fructose corn syrup. So we're putting farmers in South America out of business, out of work. And on top of that, we're driving this. Our subsidy of corn is basically putting ourselves out of food.
Love that. I love that.
This is crazy. Jordan.
Question, but like for the water, the more an animal takes, does that mean like the better the meat is? I don't know if you,
Beef is the best of the meat.
or if it's like.
Is that true?
I think that's maybe a personal, like, taste, like,
But it's higher
if you like,
quality.
okay, so I'm vegan, you guys already know that by now. Bacon is amazingly delicious. I know it's amazingly delicious, right? I get it. It's really yummy. But the reason is it has nitrates in it and all sorts of, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, so whether or not meat that uses more water is tastier, I don't know.
Well,
I don't
because
know.
like chicken has better like protein value than beef, but it uses less water.
Well, it's so comparing chicken and beef, it depends on what you're looking at.
'Cause,
So
like, chicken has more protein per pound.
I don't know. I do know that
And less fat.
it, yes, that's true. It's supposed to be healthier for you, but it also causes inflammation. But I don't want to get on a food soapbox, so let's not do
Check
that.
it, there's actually a little difference between chicken and beef as far as
Okay, what do we got?
protein content.
What is it?
It has like better
My
skill.
fingers are so
Because you eat chicken?
Okay, well, you keep
I
looking
don't
that,
think
that,
so,
that. We're gonna
maybe
keep
you're on
going.
to something.
Okay, so my point is, I'm trying to connect these dots for you guys, right? We see dots of, the dots from the subsidy of corn. We see the dots of shipping that corn to South America. You see this going on. You know that this is being used to grow corn, which is used to feed beef, which we are eating in excess. 50 years ago, were people eating like this?
Oh.
No. Having any sort of meat on your table was not an every meal occurrence, let alone an everyday occurrence.
I love meat.
I know. I know. I know you do, Andrew. I know a lot of people do.
Tasty.
So, yeah, there are lots of vegan things that are pretty tasty too.
That's very true.
We've already seen the Cartoon Network episode
Yes.
where they have
I like that.
So like a cook-off and it's Chris Traeger and Ron Swanson.
I haven't seen it, but
Chris
I'm sure
Traeger?
we'll talk about it forever. And you do like to bring up these topics, Andrew, but we have to keep going. Okay. All right, so I think we've kind of covered that. What else is interesting about the Ogallala Aquifer article you guys read? Yeah,
Are some farmers like stopping or like reducing the amount that they use?
that's right.
They were
Yeah.
kind of getting angry at the neighbors.
And so Jordan, tell me, where do you see the Ogallala Aquifer? Where is it? It's all in the Midwest. It's all the way up to, it's in, obviously Nebraska, but it goes up towards the Dakotas too, right? It's huge. And in certain areas, as you said, farmers are not using as much. And what is that allowing, what is it doing?
Just like for future generations, they're doing it to rise up, but.
So they talk about it in terms of not going down as much. So we're not quite at the point where overall we're able to raise it. In certain areas, they might be able to get to neutral or maybe a little bit above.
Ooh.
But the better thing that the bigger thing that they're talking about is not getting it to go down as much each year. And also, what is driving this? Like, why are farmers pulling so much water besides the fact that they're trying to produce corn and all of this? Are we allowed to pull that much water from places?
Well, if we live out in like Nevada.
Yeah, so this has to do with water rights. right?
Oh.
Yeah,
Was it one state suing another because they weren't allowing enough water to go down?
that's right.
Yes.
Have you guys ever seen or documentaries from Banff Film Festival? Have you guys heard of Banff?
Mm-mm.
No, if you go to the U, every year at Kingsbury Hall in February, they screen the Banff Film Festival, and they have like 3 nights of it, and it's got really cool documentaries from rock climbing to water use in. Okay, so one of the ones that I saw was on the Colorado River. Do you guys know about the Colorado River?
Yeah.
So historically, where does the Colorado River flow to?
Colorado? It's like, is it LA? No.
All the
Sid-
way through Mexico
Oh.
to the ocean.
Where'd it go?
And it does not flow there anymore. Because, why?
It ends in Cali?
What?
They're gonna cut it off.
Yes, the United States is using so much of the water from the Colorado River that there's nothing left when it gets down. There's some areas where it's barely even a trickle, and then it just kind of disappears. So, yeah, this idea of water use, who does the water belong to? I mean, if I were Mexico, I'd be pretty pissed because that's a source of fresh water that we don't get to use because the United States is using all of it, right? In Colorado, did you guys know that it's illegal to collect rainwater? You know those rain barrels you see people have here in Salt Lake? It's actually illegal. So water is such a contentious issue there that you're not even allowed to do that.
Why do you
Wow.
put rainwater?
Because where does the rainwater go?
Aquifer?
It goes into the ground, into waterways at which cities use, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, if you went up into the Wasatch and decided to start carting out thousands of gallons of that water every day, do you think the city would have something to say about that?
Yeah.
Probably, because that's the water that
It's watershed.
yeah, that's the water that we use for life, right? So, yeah, Krista.
But aren't we allowed to be able to collect our own water?
From our own land, yeah, we are allowed to collect rainwater.
Are we?
Yes. What?
Oh, good.
Yeah, we are. So there's also this loophole that was really interesting. I don't know if it talked about it in the Salt Lake City article, I'm pretty sure it did. But there's a loophole that back in the 1800s, when people first, when non-Native Americans came out west and settled lands, because obviously the pioneers were not the first people out here. We know that, right? There were Native Americans that were here before them. When people of European ancestry came out west to settle this area, that land, they were granted rights to water use on those lands that allowed them to pull water from canalways that weren't necessarily just rainwater, but it was water running through a canal, and they're able to take water out of that. So how does that connect to the Great Salt Lake issue? What did you guys read about with the Great Salt Lake?
So they were
Anna.
saying that like climate change wasn't the main factor as to why the Great Salt Lake is shrinking. It's because we're rerouting the water that's supposed to go back into the Great Salt
That's
Lake
right.
and we're using it for ourselves.
Exactly. And so when we use it, let's think about this. When we use that water, let's say you put it on your lawn. I water my lawn. What happens to it? The water is evaporated. It doesn't stay right there and come back down, right? That's traveling everywhere. So we're eliminating that water from the system, and not as much will end up back in the Salt Lake. So that water level in the Salt Lake is decreasing. It's at an extremely low.
The Great Salt Lake though?
Okay, let's talk about that. Why do we need the Great Salt Lake?
Because like nothing lives in it.
Well,
Really?
there's an entire
Chris-
ecosystem in there. And
Oh my gosh, yeah,
Yeah.
Chris and Savannah.
multiple. So there's an entire ecosystem for one, but also it's the actual lake that is exposed. It's actually an extreme like pollutant, so it actually like completely destroys our air in the community. So
The
Interesting.
lake bed will?
Krista.
So it's
Get to
called
the air.
the lake effect. If you ever hear any weather people talking about it, it's what helps clear out our pollution out of the valley, and it's also what helps create rainstorms that helps create water for up in the mountains.
So I'm thinking of something completely different than what Krista said, but that's awesome. Sort of a little bit along the lines of Savannah.
Yeah,
Anna, do you have
like
something?
there are tons of stuff living in the lake. They're like little tiny
Brine shrimp.
little
That's
shrimps,
like-
but then like they feed birds in that area, and those birds are like.
Do you know where
sources of,
eagles
like-
migrate through?
Where?
The Great Salt Lake. I mean, it's a huge migratory area because
Just
these
because humans
birds
aren't eating the food there.
Yeah, so this is a really, really crucial area where you have endangered species that,
Both.
as they're migrating, they stop there. A lot of them stay there. Have you ever been to Antelope Island? Do
Yeah.
you know how many birds are out there?
A bunch.
So many.
an S ton, is what I want to say.
Like,
there's
so
a
many.
lot out there. So yeah, the Great Salt Lake might not be important today, right to you, Andrew, but overall, as Chris is pointing out, as Savannah's pointing out, as Anna's pointing out, it is important. So it is concerning, right? Yeah. Any other questions on that? Okay, so yeah, it's an issue. It's not just me watering my lawn, but it's these people who have these rights to use this water, and they might be using it for more than just personal lawn watering. They might be using it for industry use and stuff like that. So, so that's certainly part of the issue. Also, the Salt Lake Valley is exploding. So I moved here about 6 years ago. In the 6 years that I've been living here, I have seen so many apartment buildings go up downtown. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's incredible everywhere. The population is really exploding in Salt Lake, and as we know, water is finite. And not only on a global scale, but it's also kind of finite on a local scale. So where we're getting our water from, that's kind of a finite amount, right? So, and the other issue, how does global climate change affect our water source? Any thoughts? How is global climate change affecting our water sources? Where do we get, okay, water comes down through the Wasatch, but where does that water come from?
Snow.
The snow, right?
We get less snow.
And what happens, so you can kind of see snow in the mountains up until a couple weeks ago. You might be seeing like one little patch here or there right now. But what happens is if that snow melts too quickly, then by the end of the summer we're in severe drought, right? Because we don't have as much water coming down there. Does that make sense, Jordan?
What?
I was asking, you kind of had a
Oh,
quick
no,
go-
yeah.
So does that make sense?
Yeah.
So depending on how quickly that water is melting in the mountains, that will determine how long we have this water available to use, right? And it's also obviously not just an issue for us, but it's an issue for organisms too. As we talked about, alpine environments are really sensitive. And if that water melts super quickly, it's all going to run out, and it's not going to provide water for that environment later in the summer. So the longer that snow sticks around, the better. And with global climate change, we're seeing hotter summers here in Salt Lake, and it's causing that snow to melt a lot quicker. Also really interesting, there's a professor at the U who does research on snowpack. So his grad students are usually backcountry skiers who will, do you guys know what backcountry skiing is? So they tromp up there and measure the snowpack a bunch of times a season. And he's looking at air pollution and how that affects the snowpack. So have you guys ever seen snow that has a leaf on it? What happens to that leaf? Or a rock or pebble or something?
Goes down into
It goes down, right?
Yeah.
Because it absorbs more heat and it melts the snow more quickly around it, right? So what air pollution does is you get sediment from the air and it's little black specks all over the snow, right? And that causes the snow to melt more quickly. So that's another issue. Yeah. All right, let's see. Okay, next thing I wanted to talk about is another human effect on water, which are dams. How do dams, what do we do with dams? Anyone? Come on, you know it. What's that?
Make a lake.
You do make a lake.
cut off water downstream.
Power generating.
Yeah, so we use it for generating power, making lakes, because that gives us more water for longer, right? And how is this affecting the environment?
Ooh,
Fish can't swim up.
Yeah, so there are migratory fish. There are salmon, for example, that have to swim from the ocean up through rivers to lay their eggs. And then the fish hatch and they go back out to the ocean. So if you put a dam right in the middle, that's a really big problem. They can't go. And on top of that, sometimes they leave little tiny sections where fish could swim through if they wanted to. But when you have a giant lake that's caused by a dam, you miss out on having a flow. So a lot of times fish will swim upriver. But if there's no flow, they don't know where up is. Yeah,
Wow.
it is pretty sad. And a lot of dams actually around the country are not actually being used anymore, but they're still there. So there's this initiative to take down dams that are not efficient or not being used enough, things like that, to try to allow our water systems to have a more natural state. Yeah.
Rip. Nothing to say.
Okay,
Salmon
and
cannon.
let's move on then. Okay, so we're going to talk about primary production now.
Suck with salmon. Oh, that's so
But they can have my information if they need it for surveys. It's selfless.
True American.
Okay, so tell me, what is primary production?
Plants. Taking
Right.
like energy from the sun or
Cytobacteria.
like the environment.
Yeah,
and producing it.
Exactly. Okay, and we can think of primary production in terms of biomass. And you might say, but wait a minute, consumers, they also have biomass to them. But really, 99%